Bernie Sanders speaks my language. Everything from making sure the economy works for all of us, everything from making sure that everyone has the right to marry the person that they love, which he's been fighting for. But you're not here to listen to me. You are here to listen to the next president of the United States.
I thought we were going to have a quiet little breakfast. All right, what a turnout. Thank you so much, Jane. Please stand up. This is my wife, Jane. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Let me say a few words about myself and what this campaign is about. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And then I, years later, moved to Vermont, one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. But what I learned growing up in a family that did not have a lot of money, we lived in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment, was the huge impact that lack of money has on families. Not just the very simple lesson that I learned as a kid, same lesson my wife learned, and it's a lesson that I have never forgotten. And at the end of the day, what I'm going to tell you this morning is pretty simple. This country is the wealthiest country in the history of the world today. We have more wealth than any other country, not only in the world, but in the history of the world. But most of our people don't know that. And they don't know that because almost all of that wealth is centered in the hands of a very, very few people. And that has got to change. Now, the reason I think our campaign is doing well and why we have so many of you here this morning and why we had 10,000 people out last night in Madison is that what we're doing is just talking the reality that ordinary people are experiencing. And people are saying, why does it have to be this way? Why can't we create a very different type of country? Now you tell me, I'm going to just throw out some facts, and you tell me whether it makes any sense to you. Today in this country, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Is that what this country is supposed to be about? I don't think so.
Hell no.
Since 1985, we have seen a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class and working families to the top 1/10 of 1%. You know, my Republican colleagues are very worried about redistribution of wealth. They have nightmares about this. And they run ads. He's talking about redistribution of wealth. Well, what's the truth? The truth is there has been a massive redistribution of wealth. Unfortunately, it has gone the wrong direction. Today, and again, you tell me if this is the vision of America that most people have. Today, you have one family, the Walton family, that owns more wealth than the bottom 130 million Americans. One family. Okay. Today, in the last 2 years, listen to this. In the last 2 years, the 14 wealthiest people in this country, 14, saw their wealth increase by $157 billion. That is more wealth than is owned collectively by the bottom 40% of the American people. You add all that together, you got a rigged economy. Until yesterday, I was talking about how in terms of income, 99% of all new income goes to the top 1%. It's down to 58%. But nonetheless, today's economy, 58% of all new income is going to the top 1%. So the bottom line, when we talk about economics, is the very, very rich are getting richer, and most people are getting poorer. But it is not just income and wealth inequality that we're talking about. What we're also talking about, tragically, is the decline of the American middle class. There was once a time, young people may not know this, but this was true, 30, 40 years ago, where the middle class of this country was once the envy of the world. And the reason for that is that people who were in the middle class or poor were able to earn more money and make it into the middle class. What we have seen for the last 40 years is that the middle class of this country has been disappearing. What does that mean? In English, it means that millions of people today are working longer hours for lower wages. What it means is that 45 million Americans are living in poverty. What it means is, I was in Des Moines, Iowa a few weeks ago, and I was talking to somebody there who works with the church group. And what they do at a farmer's market, after the farmer's market is over, what they do is collect the remaining food and they bring it to an emergency food shelf. 90% of the people who go to the emergency food shelf are working people, but their wages are so low they can't feed their family. What kind of economy is that? That's not an economy that is working for the middle class or working families. So what we need to do, in my view, is to make the analysis and then come up with proposals that work for our people. Now, when you talk about the economy, we're also talking about unemployment. Unemployment today is not 5.4%, which is what the national figures tell you. Real unemployment, if you include those people who have given up looking for work and those millions of people who are working part-time, do you know what real unemployment is? It is close to 11%. And here's something that no one talks about: youth unemployment. Youth unemployment is a tragic situation in America today. There was a study that came out just recently from the Economic Policy Institute, and this is what they said. They said that for white kids between 17 and 20 who either graduated high school or dropped out of high school, their unemployment rate was 33%. For Hispanic kids, their unemployment rate was 36%. For African American kids, their unemployment rate was 51%. What are we doing to an entire generation of young people? Kids who want to get their feet on the ground, kids who want to go out and start earning a living, they can't find jobs. So in my view, and by the way, if you think that youth unemployment numbers are not related to the fact that in America we have the highest rate of people behind bars of any major country on earth, you would be sorely mistaken. So here's what we got. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. We have 33, 35, 51% of our kids unemployed. And shock of all shocks, we have more people behind bars than any other country. Maybe it might make good sense for us to be investing in education and in jobs rather than We have 5.5 million young people in this country dropped out of high school, graduated high school, and they're hanging out on street corners. They have nothing to do. In my view, rather than investing in incarceration in jails, we invest in education and jobs. And when we talk about our economy, it is also important to lay on the table a very simple fact. And that is, wages are much too low for millions of American workers, period. Now again, I put all of this in the context of this being the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We are not a poor country. If we were a poor country, we can have that discussion. We are the richest country in the history of the world. And yet in my state and in your state, there are people who are not working one job, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, trying to cobble together some income and some health insurance. And the reason for that is that wages have not kept up with inflation, and millions of people are struggling just to put food on the table. And that is why, to my view, we have got to understand that a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage, and it has got to be raised. Some of you may know that last month in Los Angeles, they raised the minimum wage in that city to $15 an hour over a couple of years. I think they did exactly the right thing. We should be doing that nationally. And what a difference this country would look like, how different it would look like when people who work 40 hours a week were not living in poverty. That's not a radical idea. If you work 40 hours a week in America, you should not be living in poverty. And when we talk about fair wages, we also have to talk about equal wages. There is no excuse for women to be making 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. When you pay equity for women workers, and when you have pay equity for women workers, you're going to take a big chunk out of poverty in America. Now, there's another issue out there that some of us in Congress and in the Senate work really, really hard on, and I am very glad that President Obama came through just the other day. Very big issue, doesn't get a whole lot of discussion. It deals with the Fair Labor Standards Act, and what that means. Our expectation was that if people work 50 or 60 hours a week, they get time and a half for working beyond 40 hours. But the truth is, because the Fair Labor Standards Act threshold had not been raised, vast majority of people working 50, 60 hours a week were not getting time and a half. President dealt with that issue the other day. The threshold goes up from 23,005 to over 50,000. Millions of workers will now get time and a half, and that is exactly the right thing. I want to touch one of the themes of our campaign, essentially, is why not? Why on so many issues is the United States, our great nation, so far behind virtually every other major industrialized country? Why? Why is that? Well, here's what, let me give you an example. As all of you know, my Republican colleagues talk a lot about, quote unquote, family values. Family values. Well, I've got 4 kids, I've got 7 grandchildren, my wife and I have been married for 27 years. I believe in family. But my view of family values is a little bit different than theirs. Their view of family values is that women in this country should not have the right to control their own bodies. I disagree. Their view of family values is that women are not intelligent enough to be able to buy the contraceptives that they need. I know, it is really laughable when you think about it. All right, we disagree. Their view of family values is that same-sex marriage should not be legal. I strongly disagree and applaud the Supreme Court for that. But it's not enough to be critical of their views of same-sex, of their views of family values. What we should be talking about is, what do family values mean to us? And let me give you a few examples. For a start, the United States must end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth which does not guarantee its working people paid medical and family leave, paid sick time, and paid vacation. Now again, the question comes up, why not? How does it happen? How come virtually every major country on earth makes it clear that when a family has a baby, when a woman has a baby, the most maybe significant moment in that family's life, that all over the world, what countries say, of course, when you have a baby, the mom and the dad should be able to stay home with that baby, to get to know that baby in the most important weeks and months of that human being's life. That's kind of commonsensical, okay? That is a family value. I can't think of a family value more significant than that. And yet in this country, what happens? If you are a working class woman and you don't have a lot of money, you give birth and maybe a week later, 10 days later, you are forced to go back to work. You cannot spend time with your baby. The dad cannot spend time with that baby. That is not a family value, and that is not a thing. And that is why I will fight for 12 weeks of paid family leave. Now, I want to mention something else to you that gets zero discussion, but it's important that we throw it on the table. And one of the points that I keep reiterating is we, ordinary people, have got to determine what the major issues are. Not television, not radio, and not the front page. And when we do that, when we determine what the real issues are affecting the vast majority of our people, the entire discussion begins to change. It's not the crisis of yesterday. It is the crisis of the last 40 years. It is not what happens just to one person, it's what happens to tens of millions of people. Those are the issues that we should be focusing on. Let me focus on this one for a moment. Today, as a result of the collapse of the American middle class, and as a result of declining wages, the American people, we don't talk about this at all, but you all should know this. The American people work longer hours than do the people of any other major country on earth. You all know that. And what you see, and no one talks about this, I go around the country and I look in the eyes of working people, and you know what I see? People are exhausted. People are working incredible hours. And I often tell this story, let me repeat it because it speaks to millions of families. I was outside a grocery store in Burlington, Vermont a couple of years ago, and I met this woman, came up to me, and she said, you know, Bernie, my husband and I have one kid, but I am now working 3 jobs, he's working 2 jobs, and we don't think, we would like to have more kids, but we just don't think we can be the parents we would like to be under those conditions. How many millions of families are in that boat? People who are working so hard, who are literally physically exhausted. That should not be the case in the richest country in the history of the world. The truth is that today in the global economy, the Japanese are very, very hard workers. Our people work 137 hours a year more than the Japanese. We work 260 hours a year more than the British. And God knows what goes on in France, but we work over. God bless the French. But we work over 500 hours a year more than the people in France. Now, what's my point? My point is that if you remember the history books that we all read as kids, do you remember those history books looking at pictures of workers being out on the street 100 years ago? And what they held up these, never forget, they held up these big placards and these posters. And you know, what do those placards say? Anyone know? We want a 40-hour work week. That's what it said. And what those workers were saying is, we are not beasts of burden. We are human beings. We don't want to spend our whole life just working. We want time with our family. We want time for education. We want leisure time. Well, that was 100 years ago. And 100 years have come and gone. There has been an explosion in technology. Worker productivity is way, way up. And yet it turns out that today, 85% of working men, 66% of working women work more than 40 hours a week. That is not what our economy should be about. But at the very least, what we can do, which virtually every other major country does, is guarantee at least 2 weeks of vacation time for every worker in America. There are jobs out there now, and it's becoming more and more common. Wanted a worker, 0 vacation time, 1 week vacation time. We can do better than that. Now, when we talk about the economy, it's not only inequality in wealth and income, it's not only much too high unemployment rates, it is the fact that when pollsters ask people what is uppermost in their mind, what is usually the answer people give? It's a 4-letter word, beginning with J. That's what it is. Because people are very insecure about the economy. If you're older, you're worried you're going to get fired tomorrow, be replaced by somebody who's half your age at lower wages. If you're young, you're worried that you can't find a job. So what the people of America say the most important issue out there is jobs, and they're right. So you got 2 realities. You got real unemployment close to 11%, youth unemployment over 30%. You got another reality. And that is our infrastructure, our roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, levees, and dams are crumbling. We need to invest heavily in rebuilding our infrastructure, and when we do that, we can create, with a $1 trillion investment, up to 13 million decent jobs. And think of an America where coast to coast, rather than seeing bridges which we can't travel across because they're dangerous, think of a nation in which our roads, our bridges, our rail system is significantly improved, and millions of workers are making those improvements. But when we talk about jobs, it is not just creating jobs, it is making sure we do not continue to lose jobs. You are looking at a senator and a former congressman who voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations. And who's going to do his best to defeat the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Now, in my view, this trade debate is not really complicated. I've been around it for a number of years. These trade agreements are essentially written by corporate America, by Wall Street, by the pharmaceutical industry, and they are designed to accomplish one goal, and that is to increase the profits of the corporations and big money interests. And what these trade agreements were about from day one are pretty simple. These corporations would rather go to developing countries where wages are extremely low, pay people pennies an hour, not have to obey environmental regulations, often not have to deal with unions, go to those countries, produce their products there, and then bring the products back into America. That's basically what these trade agreements are about, nothing more complicated than that. And the result has been, clearly, since 2001, this nation has lost close to 60,000 factories. Not all of that is attributable to trade, but a lot of it is. So you have these major corporations downsizing here, throwing American workers out on the street, and moving abroad. Now, in my view, the time is long overdue for us to say loudly and clearly to these major corporations that if they want us to purchase their products, they're going to have to start building those products, manufacturing those products in Vermont, in Minnesota, and in Maine. And I'll tell you what it means. No one ever said working in a factory was the best job in the world. But what it meant, historically in this country, is somebody could graduate high school, go out and get a job, and especially if you had a union behind you, you could make it into the middle class. 35 years ago. You want to hear in one sentence the transition of the American economy. 35 years ago, the largest private sector employer in the United States of America was General Motors. They manufactured automobiles, paid workers a good wage, had decent benefits, and there was a strong union there. Today, the largest private sector employer is Walmart, low wages, minimal benefits, vehemently anti-union. That is the transition of the American economy, and that is a transition that has been a disaster for working families, and that transition has to be untransitioned. And when we talk about rebuilding the middle class, we have got to rebuild the American trade union movement, because without a strong movement, workers are never going to get a fair shake in this country. When we talk about greed, when we talk about recklessness, when we talk about illegal behavior, these are just some of the words to describe Wall Street. And when we talk about incredible power, we're talking about Wall Street. And when we talk about the small number of people who in 2007, 2008 destroyed this economy, created a situation where millions of workers lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings, we are talking about the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior on Wall Street. It is my strong view that anyone who tells you that the United States Congress can regulate Wall Street has got it backwards. It is Wall Street that regulates the United States. It is time to break up the largest financial institutions in this country. Wall Street cannot continue to be an island unto itself, gambling trillions of dollars in risky financial instruments while expecting the public to bail it out. If a bank is too big to fail, that bank is too big to exist. We have got to break them up. Now let me touch on another issue which impacts every other problem that we face in America. If you're concerned about education, you're concerned about healthcare, concerned about the environment, concerned about women's rights, workers' rights, you must be concerned about the disastrous campaign finance system. And let me be as blunt and straightforward on this issue as I can be. As a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, the American political system has been totally corrupted, and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. I wish I could tell it to you in a less straightforward way, but that is the simple truth. What we believed when we were growing up is democracy means one person, one vote. We disagree with each other, we argue, you gotta vote, you gotta vote. Sometimes I win, sometimes you win. That is not the system that we have today. The system that we have today is that the Supreme Court said to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, okay guys, you own much of the economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government. That's essentially what they said. And what has happened is the wealthiest people in this country said, great, we always wanted our very own government. And now we have the opportunity to buy it. So what the Koch brothers and other billionaires are now doing is spending unlimited sums of money on candidates whose function in life is to make the rich richer and everybody else poorer. Now, in this particular election cycle, what you are seeing is the Koch brothers, an extremely right-wing family, the second wealthiest family in America, worth about $85 billion. This is a family that wants to end Social Security, end Medicare, end Medicaid, end public education, end the United States Postal Service, do away with virtually every major piece of legislation passed in the last 75 years that protects workers. This family will now spend in this election cycle more money than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Brothers and sisters, that is not democracy, that is oligarchy, and that is I'm taking a risk in this campaign. I'm doing it differently than other people. I'll tell you what, this is really the simple truth. I don't have a super PAC, and I don't want billionaires to contribute to my campaign, which is easy to say because they wouldn't contribute anything. But I don't want their money. But that's, now we're getting to another issue. You know what goes on, and it's not only, the extreme right-wing guys, because campaigns today cost so much money. Do you know what most candidates, most members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, you know what they spend their lives doing? They spend their lives getting on the phone, what we call dialing for dollars. They don't do public meetings like this, or if they do, what did it cost you, $25 to get on here today? Trust me, they would have a couple of zeros added to that $25. Because the function is not to communicate with people, it's not to discuss the issues with the American people, it's to raise as much money as they possibly can, so they can give the money to a political consultant who will then go to a media guy and put ugly negative 30-second TV ads on television. And they spend more and more time raising the money because Citizens United has raised the limits on what campaigns will cost. So to my mind, and I don't make many campaign promises, but this is one I have made and I repeat to you. And that is that I will have a litmus test for the nominees that I present to the United States Senate. And that litmus test is they will overturn the Citizens United. I'll tell you what else I believe. I am an old-fashioned guy who actually believes that democracy is an extraordinary system. And I believe that we should do everything that we can to encourage people to vote, not suppress the vote. I believe that we should encourage our young people to participate in the political process. So if you got young people who are progressive, they're moderate, they're conservative, whatever, I want them to be able to say, I'm going to run for the school board, I'm going to run for president, I'm running for Congress because I'm proud to be an American, I believe in my ideals. But I don't want those young people or any candidate to have to beg money from the wealthy and the powerful. And that is why I believe that we have got to move toward public funding of elections. Let me touch on another issue which until recently has not been getting a lot of discussion, but it is so obvious, so commonsensical, that I think millions of people all over this country are beginning to stand up and talk about this issue. And here's the issue. Everybody in this room knows that we live in a highly competitive global economy. And everybody understands that for us to succeed as a nation, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. That's a simple reality. But what also people today understand is that it is grossly unfair to say to hundreds of thousands of bright, young, lower-income kids or working-class kids, your dream of going to college, your dream of making it into the middle class is never going to be fulfilled because your family does not have a lot of money. That is wrong, and that has got to change. But not only is it unfair to pull the ladder away from these young people who want nothing more than to make it to the middle class, it is totally absurd if we are talking about the future of the United States of America. So what we have got to do is learn a lesson from Germany, learn a lesson from many European countries. Chile just announced this, Chile, a lower-income country, just announced this the other day. And that is that I have introduced legislation which would make public colleges and universities tuition-free in America. Why is that? I see some young people here excited about the idea. But it is more important than just for the kids who are in high school or in college. This is why it's important. Tragically, all over this country, and by the way, we are a nation where over half of the children in public schools are on free or reduced lunches.
Yes.
We are in a nation where kids in 5th grade, in the 6th grade, they don't have to know it intellectually, they know it emotionally. Their mom never went to college, their dad never went to college, which was the case of my family as well. Never went to college. Their neighbors never went to college. The people they know never went to college. And these kids instinctively understand that no matter how hard they work at school, how well they do, they're never going to make it into college. And when we loudly proclaim that public colleges and universities are tuition free, what we are saying to these kids in the 6th grade is if you do study, if you do your work well, you will in fact be able to go to college. You will be able to make it into the middle class. That revolutionizes education in America. And the other half of the equation in terms of the financing of higher education, what we are doing is equally done. And that is we have millions of Americans today, some of them are young, many of them are middle-aged, who are being crushed by oppressive student debt. A year ago, I had a meeting in Burlington, Vermont, met with some people, and there was a woman whose dream in life was to become a primary care physician working with lower income people. And that is exactly what she is doing right now. And that's exactly what we need all over this country. Primary care physicians. As a result of that dream, she came out of medical school $300,000 in debt. Okay. Now I thought that was, wow, that was off the charts. I was in Iowa a couple of months ago, and I made that statement, and a young woman comes up to me after the meeting and says, Bernie, you think $300,000? I just graduated dental school. I'm $400,000 in debt. Bottom line is that all over America, you have people who are saddled with this incredibly oppressive debt. Just spoke to somebody a few weeks ago. She's paying 20% of her income back into student debt. That means that people can't buy homes, they can't get married, they can't have kids because they're carrying this debt for decades. Now here's the crazy point. People have interest rates on that debt of 7, 8, 10%.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you could go out and refinance your home at what? 2 or 3%. So why do we punish people and families? Because they wanted to get an education. So what our legislation does is allow those people carrying student debt to refinance their debt at significantly lower interest rates than they have today. Today, the United States government makes billions on these high interest rates. The United States government, in my view, should not be profiteering off high interest rates from low income and working class families. And if you do those two things, allow refinancing, get the government out of the business of profiteering on student debt, we can lower interest rates by more than half, and that is exactly what we should be doing. Now, when we talk about the major issues facing our country, again, we have got to determine what those issues are, not the television networks. And when we look at a global issue that cannot be swept under the rug, a global issue that has got to be addressed, what we are talking about as responsible adults, as parents, we must leave this planet in a condition that is habitable for our kids and our grandchildren. We must address we must address the planetary crisis of climate change. And let me just say this. Within the scientific community, the debate is over. Virtually all of the scientists who write on this subject, who study this subject, acknowledge A, climate change is real, B, climate change is caused by human activity, C, climate change is already causing devastating problems, not only in the United States, but around the world. And if you look at the water situation in California, if you look at what's happening in Karachi, Pakistan, where people are dying from an outrageous heat wave, we understand what's going on. And what the scientists also tell us, and I sit on both the Senate Environmental Committee and the Energy Committee, what the scientists also tell us is that we have a short window of opportunity, to transform our energy system before the climate change situation becomes really calamitous. And what they are telling us, if we do not radically change our energy system by the end of this century, not so many years from now, this planet Earth will be between 5 degrees and 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. And what that will mean all over this planet is more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean and what that does to mammal life in the ocean. What it will also mean is that, according to the CIA and the Department of Defense, in countries all over the world where people can't get the water they need, don't have the land that they need to grow their food, there's going to be migrations of people causing massive international conflict. That is the future that we are looking at if we do not get our act together. And that is why I believe that the United States must lead the world boldly and aggressively, working with other countries around the world. We can't do it alone, but we can lead the world in breaking our dependence on fossil fuels, on moving to energy efficiency, on moving to such sustainable energies as wind, solar, geothermal, and others. And we can do it.
Oh, yeah.
We really can do it.
Yeah.
We know what has to be done. I mean, I'll give you a million examples of some really good success. You go to Iowa, pretty soon 40% of their electricity is going to be coming from wind. In my state, I wish I could tell you it was a sunnier state, but we're doing really well with solar. You got utility solar in the Mojave Desert now providing electricity for hundreds of thousands of households. There are new technologies being developed. In Vermont, we put money into weatherization, older homes. We cut fuel bills by 50%, cut carbon emissions by 50%. And the technology only gets better. We can do this. But let me draw a circle here and bring you back to this issue of campaign finance. As you know, you're looking at perhaps the most progressive member of the United States Senate. And I disagree with my Republican colleagues on virtually every issue, needless to say. But here is an issue where it's not a question of disagreement. It is a question of money in politics. Virtually all, not all, but virtually all Republicans in Congress either deny the reality of climate change or the fact that human activity is causing climate change. Now, they don't deny cancer research. They don't deny diabetes research. They don't deny a whole lot of science. But when it comes to climate change, they are deniers. And you know why that's so? Because if they stood up today and said, wow, I just read the scientific treatise, climate change is real, it's dangerous, we've got to do something about it. You know what happens to them? The Koch brothers and the other big energy people say, oh yeah, you ain't gonna get your campaign funds. In fact, we're gonna fund somebody to run in a primary against you. That's what the loop is about. That's the role of money in politics. And that is why not only do we have to transform our energy system, we have to transform our campaign finance system. And then, during this campaign, I'm going to be talking over and over again about where the United States falls behind many other countries. Okay? Because I think that as smart people, we should be learning from countries around the world that are doing things better than we are, just as they should be learning from us when we do things better than they do. And let me touch on the issue of healthcare for a moment. Some of you may know, and some of you may not know, that the United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. Despite the fact that we have made some good gains in the Affordable Care Act, 35 million Americans today continue to have no health insurance, and many of you in this room have high deductibles and high co-payments, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question that we have got to ask ourselves is, should we join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all Americans as a right? And I think so. And then the second question that we have to ask is, how does it happen that we end up spending so much money on a dysfunctional system? We spend, as a nation, almost, not quite, almost twice as much per person on healthcare as do the people of other countries who guarantee healthcare to all of their people. And then you look at our healthcare outcomes, and I know we're in the Mayo Clinic world here, and people do look at these things, and you find out that our life expectancy, how long we live, is lower than many other countries. Our infant mortality rate is higher than many other countries. And in terms of a number of illnesses, not all, but a number of illnesses, we do not do as well as other countries, spending almost twice as much per capita. So what we need to do, it seems to me, is number one, guarantee health care to all people, do it in a cost-effective way. And that means, most significantly, demanding for a start that the pharmaceutical industry not charge us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And number two, get the private profit-making insurance companies out of healthcare. Which leads me to the conclusion that the way we should go forward is with a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, it seems to me that my Republican colleagues in many ways get away with murder, in the sense that what they do in Washington is not widely known by the American people. And the result of that is that many working class and middle class people end up voting against their own best interests and vote for people who are working day and night for the billionaire class. Now let me just tell you very briefly, I am the ranking member, leader of the opposition, representing the Democrats on the Budget Committee. And I want to just take a moment to tell you what you don't know. Media forgot to report it. What was in the Republican budget that passed the Congress a couple of months ago. This is what they did. And everyone has got to know it. We've got to get this word out to middle class and working class Republicans. At a time when 35 million Americans have no health insurance, the Republican budget ended the Affordable Care Act, made over $400 billion cuts in Medicaid. The result, 27 million Americans thrown off of health insurance. And you look at the Republicans, you say, excuse me, how many of those people will die? How many of those people will become much sicker? And you know what they say? Nothing. They have no response. Every day they're telling us about the problems of the Affordable Care Act. They have no program to guarantee health care to all Americans in anything close to an affordable cost. But it's not just health care. We talked this morning about the fact that working class families all over America can't afford to send their kids to college. You know what the Republican response was? Over a 10-year period, they cut Pell Grants by $90 billion, making it hard for working class families to send their kids to college. And then in a nation where millions of our people are literally struggling to put food on the table, where half of the kids in our public schools are on free or reduced lunch, what they did is made massive cuts, tens of billions of dollars in nutrition programs, including the WIC program, which is designed to provide nutrition for low-income pregnant women and their babies. Cut. And then, to add insult to injury, what they decided to do is provide, over a 10-year period, hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks for the wealthiest 0.2% of the families in America. Cut health care, cut education, cut nutrition, give huge tax breaks to the wealthiest families in America.
Disgusting.
Now, our vision, they get away with this stuff because the American people really don't know what's going on. And what they get away with is dividing us up on issues like abortion or gay marriage or guns. And they try to divide the American people. Our job is to go out to our co-workers, and to our neighbors, and look them in the eye and say, do you really think it is a good idea for you to be voting for people who are going to send your job to China? Do you think it is a good idea to be voting for candidates who are going to throw your kids off of health insurance? Do you think it is a good idea for you to be voting for candidates who are going to make it more difficult for you to send your kids to college? Do you really want to vote for people who are going to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country? No. So what our job is to go out to our friends, our families, our co-workers, and start a discussion with them. And it is not an easy discussion, I know that. We're going outside of our comfort zones. But I think when we get the message across to them that the Koch brothers founded the Tea Party, and we should educate them about the agenda of the Koch brothers. And when we turn them around and we bring people together, we're going to have a movement that cannot be stopped. The point here is, in a democracy, people disagree. My wife will get up here and tell you she disagrees with me, so, on occasion. We disagree with each other. But what we should not be doing is voting against the best interest of our parents and our kids. We've got to bring our people together. Let me conclude, and then we'll open it up for some questions and comments. Let me conclude by saying this. Let me go back to the first point, and that is, this is not a poor country. The debate that we're having should not be about how many more people we throw off of health insurance. The debate we should be having is how quickly we can guarantee health care to all people. The debate should not be about how much we're going to cut education in this town, this state, or this country. The debate should be about how we have the best pre-K system and child care system in the entire world, and how we make sure that every kid in this country who has the ability is able to get a college education. The debate should not be about how many people go hungry in America. The debate should be about ending the disgrace of having 45 million Americans living in poverty. What we have got to do is to think big and not small, not get caught up in their worldview. Yes. You know, there are struggling families in America today who have to make the choice about whether they adequately feed their kids or whether they pay the rent or pay the electricity bill. But this is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Trillions of dollars have been transferred from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. Our job is to organize. Our job is to educate. Our job is to fight back. What this campaign is about, my campaign, it is not. I appreciate people saying Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. Thank you. But it ain't about me. It really is not about me. Let me tell you why. I will be the only candidate for president who perhaps has ever said this. And that is, if I were elected president tomorrow, under the current circumstances, there is relatively little that any president fighting for the working class and middle class can accomplish because of the power of the billionaire class in corporate America and Wall Street. They are just too powerful. That's the simple reality. And in fact, there are some very smart people who will tell you it's probably too late, that they cannot be beaten. Their control over the economy, their control over the political system, their control over the media is so great that they have got it all, and we can't beat them. Well, I don't think that that is the case. And on behalf of my 4 kids and 7 grandchildren, and your kids and your grandchildren, we in fact are going to fight back. But here is the whole point. Here is the point. What I am asking of you is not just your support for this campaign. I am asking that. but I'm asking something more. I cannot accomplish what has to be accomplished as president unless there is a mass grassroots movement of millions and millions of people. If we want to make sure that every young person has the opportunity to go to college, you know what we need from you young people? We need you to be marching on Washington, to standing with us. What Republicans assume is the American people are pretty dumb. They don't know what's going on. We're not going to tell them what's going on. But if there is a bill out there that says public college and public universities are going to be tuition free, we can win this when millions of people say, yeah, that is what we want. Let me give you an example. And this is a really positive thing that happens. Change, as all of you know, change does not come from the top down. Change historically, whether it has been the union movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay movement, the environmental movement, it comes from down up. Yes. That's how change comes from. And that's what this campaign is about. I'll give you a few examples of where we are making some real progress because of people at the grassroots level. 4 or 5 years ago, some people in the trade union movement said, you know, we have got to get moving on doing something about this minimum wage. People can't make it on $7.25 an hour. And they began mobilizing, and some of you have read about young people, fast food workers going out on the streets and so forth. Well, all over this country, in cities and in states, minimum wage is going up. A poll in the Wall Street Journal last week said that by a pretty significant vote, the American people support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour because of the pressure from the For years, the Republicans have wanted to cut Social Security. Poll in the Wall Street Journal says, by a very strong vote, the American people don't want to cut Social Security, they want to expand Social Security. My message to you is that if we stand together, if we bring our people together, if we think big about the kind of country we can become, which protects the needs of all of us rather than a few, there is no limit to what this great country can accomplish. Thank you all very much. Shannon, raise your hand. Shannon's over there. Phil is over here.